What's up, guys, and welcome to our next installment of our fantasy mini-series. Today, we are talking about the Tennessee Titans. They finished 9-7 in the AFC South last year. That was good for second place in the AFC South behind the Houston Texans, but they did advance in the playoffs all the way to the AFC Championship. They beat the New England Patriots in the wild card round. They beat the Baltimore Ravens in the divisional round, and then they lost to the eventual Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship 35-24. So a very successful season for them, a season that I don't think anybody really expected. All on the shoulders of, well, not really the shoulders of Ryan Tannehill, but Tannehill was there to help. All in the legs of Derrick Henry, I would say, probably is more accurate.
Mm.
But Tannehill, he goes into his first full season as a starter for the Tennessee Titans. They are without Marcus Mariota now, so there's really not the pressure of Mariota even breathing down his neck anymore, if there even was that pressure last year. But now Tannehill, he should have a full 16 games. I got him projected out at about 3,300 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, another 200 rushing yards on the ground with 3 touchdowns on the ground. He's a semi-mobile quarterback. He can definitely get it done with his legs. So give him 3 touchdowns on the ground. Like I said, Mariota's not there, so their quarterback room behind Tannehill is on the weaker side, which shows you that this is Ryan Tannehill's team now. It's he's not going to be giving it up to anybody. He did just sign a 4-year extension with them, so they're very happy with the way things are going. When we get to the running backs, we'll definitely be a little bit more excited in why this team moves how it moves. But what's your thoughts on Ryan Tannehill and the quarterbacks here?
I mean, Ryan Tannehill surprised a lot of people. I won't say I was overly surprised because when he had an effective offense in Miami, he was pretty good. I mean, he's better than people. I think he has that stigma. Anyone coming from Miami that they're terrible, but Ryan Tannehill was always very effective. I kind of like him at his ADP right now. He's going as the 18th quarterback off the board. I will say that the biggest thing that concerns me is too much of this passing game was based off of being very efficient. And when I say efficient, I mean unsustainably efficient. I mean, it's almost impossible to be as efficient as they were down the stretch in terms of their completion percentage, their catch percent. I mean, you look at it, I mean, they were just, even their red zone percentage, which I'll talk about later, I mean, they were converting at a ridiculously high mark. And it's one of those things you really have to question, can they sustain it? And as much as I don't like saying, oh, someone's going to regress, but it's statistically not likely that an offense can be that efficient over the course of a second whole season. So that's my biggest concern there. But you can't deny the production last year. He was ninth in points per game on the entire year, and that's extremely impressive considering they had the third fewest pass attempts. So, that once again, that just speaks to, and I've said efficient 20 times already, and I'm not going to say it anymore, I promise, but that's just the reality with this offense. And I'll just to kind of capitalize on that point. He only started 12 games last season, but 8 of those 12 starts he was a QB1, so he was very consistent. He had week in and week out production, and another underrated part of his game is he was a wide receiver in college, so he actually is very speedy. He had nearly 200 yards on the ground in 12 games, and given a full 16 game season, he'd probably have right around 300, which offers him a nice floor for your team. But I'd take him as a backup quarterback if you roll that way. I don't think his upside is top five. And, normally I'd say his upside's not even top 10, but I would be wrong in saying that because he did it last season. So, he offers pretty good value considering his season last year as the 18th quarterback off the board.
Yep, he's definitely. I mean, for the Titans, he's good. He can get you some nice boomer bust weeks, but he's not really. You said that he's going at about quarterback 18, or that's what he finished last year was quarterback 18. He's Yeah, I mean that's about where I'd put him too. He
Yeah.
offers. I mean they do play against the Jacksonville Jaguars twice and they play against the Colts who have a good defense and the Texans who have a good defense. But there's going to be some weeks where he could put up 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns or so. But there's most of the weeks they're going to run through this next guy, Derrick Henry. He's the heart and soul of that offense. Dion Lewis is now gone. They brought in Darrington Evans in the third round of the draft this year, and if you had your rookie draft in your dynasty leagues a couple weeks ago, before Derrick Henry got his extension, Evans was going a little higher than what you would like, but now he's kind of dropped down a little bit because they did extend Derrick Henry. So now he's got a nice, fresh new contract there. Evans is still, I think he's going to be a player that's going to come in and kind of just help out Derrick Henry in the run game. He's going to give Henry a break every once in a while. As we know, Henry doesn't really catch the ball out of the backfield too much, so Evans might get some passing yardage work and stuff like that. But you don't need to. Well, not you. Not any running back.
No, me.
No, not. I mean, not you, but not any running back could just go out and do this. But Derrick Henry doesn't necessarily need to catch the ball to be a top 5 running back. He did it last year with just with his legs grounding and pounding the ball. But he's going in the first round like he should be in a lot of redraft leagues and dynasty leagues too. I've seen him go for late first, early second. But what's your thoughts on Derrick Henry and Darrington Evans here?
So I really liked Darrington Evans a few weeks ago. I still like him, but I think his upside's more capped now that Derrick Henry is going to be there long term. But the reality is he'll have a role. Derrick Henry only played about 66% of the snaps last year, so Evans still can carve out a nice role at around 30% of the snaps, play on third down, maybe catch 40 to 50 passes, have a little bit of flex value, but I think long term his value is capped now, and he's more a complementary piece in that offense. So not as optimistic as I was. If anything, I'd say at his peak he could maybe be James White, but I don't even necessarily see him carving out a role like that. And I would say he's probably more explosive than him. So if he's ever able to get out of Derrick Henry's enormous shadow, he may have a little more upside. But I'll go over to Derrick Henry now. I mean, he had a crazy season last year. That's a reality. One of the interesting stats, and every time we talk about Derrick Henry, I always bring it up because I find it fascinating that when he went over 100 yards last season, and this is only in the regular season, the Titans as a team were 8-0. I mean, so that's all you need to know about the Titans as a whole. I mean, they literally won as Derrick Henry went, and you saw that even more so in the playoffs. And I like what the Titans are building. I like Mike Vrabel, which I'll talk about later, but this is a team that was 7th in rush attempts, so he has all the ability in the world to definitely be a top 10 back. My biggest problem with him overall, though, is I just think his upside is capped in PPR leagues, which is 95% of leagues now, just because he's not really a threat in the passing game. And that's a reality. I think we saw him at his peak last year. He had over 300 carries, 1,500 rushing yards, 18 touchdowns. Could he repeat that? Possibly, especially if they continue to pound him into the ground. But, realistically, with him being there more long term, they're going to have to save him up for the next few seasons. So I'm just a little hesitant. I'm not taking him as one of the top 5 backs off the board just because I do think that upside is limited. He was the 4th running back in terms of average points last season, and I think that's a ceiling, and I think it's unreasonable to expect him to do that again. So I'm more comfortable taking him in the back end of the first. If you have that turn pick and you can grab him and Miles Sanders or somebody like that, I think that's an excellent back-to-back there. But I just get nervous because it's tough. I mean, there's a lot of stock in PPR league and receptions, and he's not really going to offer you any upside in that department.
Not at all. And we'll see if Darrington Evans gets that PPR work, or if they're just not going to use a running back to get work out of the backfield. What is their offensive line like? What's their rating there from PFF?
So they are currently ranked 15th. Last season, sometimes these rankings make me scratch my head a little bit because they were ranked 11th last season. and this year they have him 15th headed into 2020. They haven't lost any pieces. Well, okay, I guess the big one. I forgot they had Jack Conklin. I feel like he's been gone a few seasons, but he's one of the better right tackles in the league. He went over to Cleveland, so that was a big loss for him on the right side. Taylor Lewan came back. He was suspended a few games last season, but
Like always.
he's yeah, he's the man. I love Taylor Lewan. He's a hard nosed guy. He's such a Mike Vrabel kind of player when I think about the kind of team they're building. But yeah, he was suspended a little bit last year. He was a 13th among tackles when he did play though, so very talented guy. But they're kind of middle of the road right now, and if they're able to replace that production at right tackle, they could sneak up a few spots higher.
Well, they drafted Isaiah Wilson with their first round pick, so hopefully he could come in and kind of take over that right tackle spot there.
Yeah, he's a big dude.
Yeah, he's there. He was one of the top. I mean, the tackle class was pretty deep this year, but he was kind of in that top group of with your Andrew Thomases and other guys that were up there, Makai Becton's.
6'6", 350.
That's I'd hate to have him over for Thanksgiving dinner. Won't have any leftovers. No Friday turkey sandwiches. Moving on to the wide receivers. They got a nice little breakout rookie last year, A.J. Brown. They brought in Adam Humphries over from the Buccaneers last year. He was there. They got Corey Davis, who's been kind of a disappointment this far in his career. He's a fifth overall pick.
Ugh,
I don't think they picked up his franchise or his fifth year option, so this is potentially his last year in Tennessee. But we saw last year with Devontae Parker in Miami kind of have a breakout year. That's kind of what I'm calling this year for Corey Davis. Now it looks like he's starting on the PUP, he's starting on the pup, so we don't know. I don't know when he's actually going to get his playing time going. But there's really nobody there that's going to just kind of step in and that has the talent that Corey Davis does. So I wouldn't necessarily say that his job, as far as for 2020, is up in the air because he's going to be out for a couple weeks and then somebody else is just going to come in there and get 10, 12 targets and catches a game. But not to say that Corey Davis has been doing that, but Corey Davis, when he comes back, should be able to go back into the starting lineup and hopefully do enough to put some notice on so somebody gives him a chance next off season and he could live up to that top five hype. Outside of those three, though, and even Adam Humphries is a big question mark. I mean, he had those years in Tampa Bay where he was kind of I mean, he was like a second fiddle to Mike Evans, even a third fiddle to Mike Evans and Godwin 2 years ago. But last year, I mean, I think he was not. I don't want to say anybody was really excited about him going to Tennessee, but I think people kind of had some hope for him in Tennessee going over there and maybe being the number one, number two, starting out as the number one because they didn't know what A.J. Brown was going to do. But even then, I mean, he should have took that offer from New England. Let's put it that way. But he decided to go to Tampa Bay or he decided to go to Tennessee, and it really hasn't been that great.
Yeah, and I talked about this a little bit with the Seahawks, but this is one of those offense where they're not going to have a high passing volume. So realistically, it's going to be tough for them to support more than two pass catchers. And we'll see when Corey Davis comes back. He had toe surgery, so he'll probably miss the first 4 weeks of the season based on what I've read. And it's kind of funny. I saw the article on him when he had his surgery. It was a few days ago. And Derrick Henry said, "Oh, we can't lose Corey Davis because he's a talented run blocker." And I guess that just made me laugh that that's where they think his value is at. And that's crazy to say about a guy that was drafted fifth overall in the draft. But he does have value in that department. So he'll find himself on an NFL roster. Maybe he won't ever be fantasy relevant, but he'll definitely be on the field when he is healthy. And another reason, too, I don't think another wide receiver can break through is this is a very run-heavy team, as we've mentioned a few times, and they play a lot of two tight end sets. So realistically, you're only going to have A.J. Brown and Corey Davis on the field most of the time. So it'll be tough for a guy like Adam Humphries, who's more known as a slot receiver, to find a ton of volume. And when you're a slot receiver, it's all about volume and the number of receptions you can accumulate. So I think it'll be tough for Adam Humphries. But I love A.J. Brown. I think he's a legitimate wide receiver one. I mean, he showed huge potential last season. He had a 21st overall finish, which is crazy considering how poor his first half was. But right now he's going off the board as a 16th wide receiver. I think that's fair for him, and I do think he has top 10 upside. It's a little different than DK Metcalf because I think both of them can be legitimate wide receiver ones. But so far, AJ Brown showed us a little more than Metcalf has. So, but Metcalf does have the better QB. So there's positives and negatives for both of them. But and I mentioned that crazy second half for AJ Brown, and just to put some numbers to it, weeks 1 through 8, he was wide receiver 46, so not relevant at all. And then the second half of the season, from 9 through 17, he was wide receiver 5. So he's already shown that upside. He can be a top 5 fantasy asset. Love him in dynasty leagues. Usually he's going in the top 3 rounds, and I think that's absolutely fair for what he can produce for you. But he's really the only guy I'd be drafting at this point. And I know you love your Corey Davis breakout, but I'm not as optimistic. I think Corey Davis is a better real life wide receiver than a fantasy asset. Like I said, I mean, a lot of his teammates, they were raving, and the coaching staff as well, about how talented of a blocker he was. And of course, he can catch the ball a little bit, but we'll see if he can ever develop into anything more than a solid real life wide receiver.
All right, now moving on to the tight ends, we got Jonnu Smith. Delaney Walker is now gone, so Jonnu Smith kind of steps into that tight end one role, and he's getting some good value on him. He's definitely moving up draft boards, kind of sneaking into that low end tight end one range. More of a tight end two, could be a sleeper this year. Like, I mean, you are very high on a guy like Mike Gesicki. I think Jonnu Smith could kind of be in that same range where he's another target for Ryan Tannehill. We already just talked about the wide receivers, how they don't have really much going on there. So Jonnu Smith can get a lot of targets there, and he showed some promise for as long as he's been there. Basically, he's a former third round pick. Tennessee really seems to like him. Tannehill seems to like him. So there's really nobody else behind him either. So even in two tight end sets, I don't know if they maybe bring somebody in. They might even be a candidate to go out and get like an OJ Howard or a Cameron Braid or something like that and make a trade with Tampa Bay. But even if not, I think Jonnu Smith, he's probably going to be on the field 90% of the time. He's in there to block for Derrick Henry, and then he'll be out catching passes for Ryan Tannehill. So I really like him this year. He's definitely he's probably my second favorite under the radar tight end behind Hayden Hurst, who's shooting up draft boards now too.
Yeah, and Firkser really isn't a threat. He's more of a run blocking tight end and a very run heavy scheme. So I agree. Jonu's very interesting. He's very athletic. He's a very talented pass catcher. And I think realistically, he's probably the biggest beneficiary with Corey Davis going down, because I would say with almost 100% certainty now that Jonu is the number 2 pass catcher in this offense. And I don't think that's unreasonable to say at all. So he has a lot of upside there. And right now he's going as the tight end 17 off the board. So he does offer some upside if he can crack into the top 12 there, which I do think he can. And he already proved it. And I know a lot of people say, oh, that doesn't seem like it's possible. But last season, he was tight end 13 from week 7 through 17. So over half the season, he provided almost tight end 1 value. So I think he offers even more upside now with Corey Davis potentially not being as involved. And we'll see when Corey Davis comes back. But I do think Jonnu can be the number 2 pass catcher in this offense.
All right, and then their special team situation. They got Greg Joseph there. They got a undrafted free agent Tucker McCann there. It's probably Greg Joseph's job. Um, I mean, the offense could put up points, but it's not. I'm probably not going in the direction of Greg Joseph. There's definitely better kickers out there. They do play in a warmer weather environment. Their divisional games are in warmer weather, or Indianapolis is in a dome, so he does have some good kicking elements there, but it's not. I mean, when I think of going to draft a kicker, I'm not thinking to myself, I want the Tennessee Titans kicker.
Yep, I agree with that 100%. Greg Joseph actually struggled pretty mightily last season, so I don't really expect him to have much of an impact realistically, he won't even be a starting kicker in the NFL in 2021. So, not much value there. And this is where I wanted to bring up quickly. I haven't said efficiency in like 10 minutes, so I need to say that word again because I'm starting to get a little twitchy here. But they were so impressive in the red zone, and I've talked about this before, but realistically, your kicker is going to have more opportunities if your team struggles in the red zone. And the Titans scored a touchdown last year on 77% of their red zone tries. I mean, I can't even emphasize, yes, gasp, that is impressive. And it was even crazier because when you look at second, they were 10% lower or higher than the second place team. So very impressive there. He's not going to get a lot of opportunities. He was very inaccurate last season, so there's no way I'm drafting him.
And then as far as their kick return and punt returns go, Adam Humphries is back there a little bit on punt returns. A name that I want to really look out for is, and we'll talk about it in our IDPs too, but he's kind of like a utility gadget player. That's Adoree Jackson. He's played on the offensive side of the ball too. And with Corey Davis being out for a few games, we might even see Adoree Jackson lining up as as the pass catching running back or line up in the slot, just as another weapon for Ryan Tannehill. So if you're in an IDP league where obviously you need to play defensive backs. He's a cornerback, but you can also get some offensive production out of him potentially too. He's a former first round pick. He's just he's a guy that is played all over the field, and with the lack of weapons on offense. Outside of AJ Brown and Derrick Henry and a little bit of Jonnu Smith, then we might see a guy like Adoree Jackson be able to step in and get you some basically some bonus fantasy points because you're playing him as a cornerback, but he gets offensive points too.
hmm Yeah, I've been surprised, I'll say, with him. Coming out of USC, a lot of people thought he was going to be an explosive kick and punt returner, and he was in his first season, but they really haven't used him in that capacity since his first year. He's actually been pretty effective as a cornerback, so he's been used less and less as a special teamer, but I wouldn't be surprised if they started to use him in that capacity again.
All right, and then going on to the defensive side of the ball, we already started with Adoree Jackson. Um, they got Jeffrey Simmons, who was a first round pick last year. He was, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he did miss all, if not most, of last year with an injury. But he was one of the guys that was talked about being a earlier round pick, and but he did have that injury coming out of college. So a team like Tennessee could afford to sit on him, and now we're going to get the best out of Jeffrey Simmons this year, kind of coming in fresh. Harold Landry is one of their linebackers. Rashaan Evans. They brought in Vic Beasley. We already talked about Adoree Jackson. And then another one of those safeties that are up high on the boards behind guys like Jamal Adams and like Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer would be Kevin Byard. He's their free safety there, gets some tackles, covers in space, and so he's if you're playing a defensive back and you don't want it to be a cornerback, then Kevin Byard is a good way to go from the safety position.
Yeah, and I would say this is a better overall unit than individually in terms of having lots of IDP relevance. They're 11th as a unit last year. I love Jeffrey Simmons on their defensive line. He did only start 7 games, as you mentioned. He missed some time. I believe he tore his ACL. I think that was the injury that he had in college, and he missed some time there. But I think he's a guy that can be a disruptor on the defensive line. Besides that, they have Daquan Jones at nose tackle. I just had to say his name because he's from my hometown, and my mom actually taught him in 3rd grade, so that's kind of cool. But besides that, nothing else on the defensive line. Jeffrey Simmons, for me, is more of a dynasty stash. Really young guy. You mentioned it. He could have been a top 5 pick if he never got injured. I mean, he was that highly regarded coming out of college. So I like his upside in dynasty drafts. Their linebacking core, lots of intrigue here. You're going to have to kind of see how it plays out. They got Vic Beasley over from Atlanta, more of a pass rusher. Wasn't overly effective as an IDP last season. Same thing with Harold Landry at the other outside linebacker position. On the inside, both of these guys are definitely draftable. Rashaan Evans was a back end second linebacker last year. I really like Jayon Brown. I think that's the name to really keep an eye out on. He was super effective last season, only played in 14 games, didn't even start all of them, still had 104 tackles, so he's going to have a full season now to really be the leader of that linebacking core and this defense as a whole. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw a breakout from Jayon Brown on the inside. That would probably, and you mentioned Kevin Byard as well too. He's definitely a top 10 safety slash IDP in most formats. I'm in a few where he scores more. He had quite a few pass defense in the past 2 seasons. So if you get points for pass breakups, he's even more valuable. There's one format I'm in where he's actually a top 5 guy because you got so many points for pass defense, and that just proves a point where you gotta pay attention to what your scoring is and really see what your player's strengths are. But very strong defense, lots of great pass rushers, a tough defensive line, and then they have Malcolm Butler coming over from the Patriots at corner. So not really fantasy relevant, but they go very deep, and this is a really nice defense.
Yeah, especially those corners. They are really deep. They got Malcolm Butler, Adoree Jackson, Jonathan Joseph, and they drafted Kristen Fulton in the
Yep.
second round this year. So even their safeties, Amani Hooker is he was a good draft pick back last year from the safety position. Kenny Vaccaro. So they got
Former
a
Pro Bowler. Yep.
really good secondary there overall, and that's part of the reason why this team succeeds too. Is from they're one of those old school ground the ball and win with your defense kind of teams, and that's what Tennessee does. So, final thoughts on the Tennessee Titans. I believe that it's going to be a man. I forgot what I said in our other in our other AFC South shows, but I think the Texans are going to come down a little bit, but. I mean, obviously, Deshaun Watson is still there, and they're always a threat with Deshaun Watson. But Tennessee honestly could have won this division last year if Ryan Tannehill started from the gate, and now he will be starting from the gate. The Colts did get better too. It's basically a 3-horse race between those three. The Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be towards the bottom, and it really could be 3-9-7 teams. I think I mentioned that before. They could be 3-9-7 teams. Maybe one of those teams gets to 10-6 and wins the division, while one of those other 9-7 teams edges the other one out for being the seventh wild card team. But
Mhm.
it's going to be really close. It's going to come down to the wire. This division specifically is the reason why I think they put Week 17 as all divisional games, because that Week 17 game between I don't even know who's on the schedule right now, but two of those teams obviously play each other, and that could be for the division. That's how close it's going to be.
Yep, this is a super competitive division. I'll just mention quickly, I haven't talked too much about Mike Vrabel, but I think he's a great young and up and coming head coach. We haven't seen very many coaches become successful that have coached with Bill Belichick, but I think you might see that Mike Vrabel and Brian Flores could be the most successful head coaches to ever come from the Belichick coaching tree. I really like what both of them have done so far. Mike Vrabel was a hard-nosed, gritty player when he played, and you see that in the way that the Titans play, and it's really cool to see what they're building. So I really like them in the future moving forward under Vrabel's leadership. I have the Colts winning the division. I actually have the Titans and Colts tied, but the Colts with the tiebreaker and the Titans, as you said, sneaking in as that last wild card team. And once again, we saw them go through one run. I wouldn't be surprised if they did it again. They're one of those teams you just feel like they're built for playoff football. When you think of the ground and pound, gritty, hard-nosed defense, that's exactly what they are. So I love the Titans. I respect how they're built, and I enjoy watching them play.
All right. So with that, that's the Tennessee Titans. We got 3 episodes left. We are with the Titans. We're into the conference championship games. So we got the Packers, the 49ers, and the Chiefs left, and that's gonna do it for our mini series here. Make sure you go back and watch or listen or either go back and watch the rest of them that we've done already. But we'll see you guys next episode for the Green Bay Packers.